Hello everyone, we're back for part 4 of our favorite E-Deck cards, and in this video we've got our favorite 5 minor improvements, ranks 5 through 1 in the E-Deck. I'm Lumen, this is Riley, also known as Graey.
Hello again.
Yep, and looking forward to giving you one more great video here on the new E-Deck.
Yeah, we have some really exciting cards in this set, some cards that are pretty unlike other cards we've seen in all the decks and revised that have very unique effects and allow you to do very, very powerful things. And so they're definitely cards to be on the lookout for when you're drafting. The first of which is Melon Patch. Now, Melon Patch might not seem all that different from cards we've seen before. It's similar to cards like Beanfield, but it ends up being an extremely powerful card. At a baseline, a lot of the time you're going to be able to sow a veggie in stage 5, and then instead of being a 1-point bean patch, or beanfield, excuse me, you get a 2-point beanfield because you get a plow. And that's kind of the baseline for this card, which is obviously amazing. Beanfield is a very solid card, and it costs food, which this does not.
Yep.
But this card can be even better than that. Obviously, there's some situations where you're going to be able to sow this in stage 4, or excuse me, 3,
yeah.
And get 2 fields, 4 points from this, which is amazing for a minor. And then there are going to be some games where this card goes absolutely crazy.
There are some combos.
Yeah, I think probably the main ones to look out for are Scythe, which allows you to clear it every harvest, and it'll be probably 4 plows.
Yep.
And then Crudité, which allows you to
trash the top veggie in a field.
Yeah, and so you basically make Melon Patch a combination lettuce patch and plow, which is just completely absurd.
Yeah. Sometimes the sow actions are the limiting factor in how much you can melon patch.
Yeah, and then Crudité also gives you a veggie, so I'm sure we'll see some insane games where people are playing this card in stage 1. And
I'm looking forward to it, yeah.
So some very fun things to look forward to, but it's really easy to see that as a baseline, this card
is a point better than Beanfield.
Yeah, which is where you want to be when you're drafting cards, because it's a very solid floor.
Yeah. Our number 4 card is Sourdough, and players of the original edition on Play Agricola will know this card as the Bread Machine. So this is a 3 occupation minor, comes with a free point, has no cost. Only prereq is that you want to use it in the first place. So very high quality card, and then it's a bake action. Not only is it a bake action, it's a bake action every round. You just have to be a little careful about when you use it. I mean, the ceiling on this thing is so incredible. The amount of food it can provide is so high. The delaying your action can be a significant factor, but you know, oftentimes it's super well worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is probably bar none the best baking card. Maybe not the best grain card if you include some things like beer keg and beer table, but definitely the most powerful bake engine in terms of feeding your family with grain. This is the best card. Some things to keep in mind is you probably want to secure the clay oven with this card because you're going to be baking a lot, and so making sure you're getting the most out of those bakes is important. And then the other thing is timing your actions. Obviously, you have to be very cognizant of when you're skipping. If you're relying on taking growth or something, you can be put in a very tough spot if something surprises you, and then you have to choose between growing and baking. So just think ahead a little bit, but as long as you're doing that, this is just an absolute premier card. And it really can be full food engine for very little cost. And as we talked about in the 6 through 10 video, never underestimate a free point. Free points are good.
Yeah, absolutely not. The trap I've sometimes hit in using this card is that I sometimes don't track carefully enough how many other people have actions left. And if one person has fallen behind in growth, this card actually can be kind of rough to use.
Yeah, it's important to note that it's not just you have to skip an action. You have to make sure you're skipping when everybody else has an action. So yeah, like Lumen said, if somebody else is playing a weird 2-room game, it can be pretty punishing, but as long as you're timing it right, it's still better to skip a high quality action second or sometimes even first action in the round than going on So Bake just to bake.
Right.
So it's still a very powerful card, but you have to be somewhat aware of what the table's looking like and when you're going to have to skip.
Yeah, there are enough reasons this isn't number one.
Yeah, for sure. The card that we have above it, I think it's fair to say on an average is maybe not as powerful a card, but we've put it at number 3 because when this card is great, it is absolutely
It's game
nuts.
breaking.
Yeah, this card can be completely absurd, and that card is Stone Axe. Stone Axe allows you to turn a stone into 3 wood, and that's an incredible conversion. There are some problems. You still have to be taking the wood action, which means similar to something like Woodcutter, if you're taking 2 wood, or with Stone Axe, you'll sometimes even see taking 1 wood actions. It can be a little bit harsh, but especially in Revised, there are games where there's a lot of stone and you want a lot of wood, and in those games, Stone Axe is absolutely incredible because this card really, really, really gives you wood.
Yeah. What are some of the naughty things you've done with Stone Axe games?
Oh god, I mean, there's some fun things you can do with the new card Entrepreneur, which lets you, if you have no resources, you get to...
Of a certain type.
Yeah, of a certain type. You get to pay half a food, essentially, for those resources, and so you can get stone over and over again. But there's tons of games where either stone is plentiful, or the other thing to keep in mind with Stone Axe is even if stone isn't necessarily plentiful, there's games where you just know that you're going to want tons and tons of wood, and so even if you don't necessarily have a stone engine, Stone Axe is just absolutely premier because, for example, a big card I can think of is Woodslide Hammer, where you know you're going to want tons of wood. You have the actions to take stone and then take smaller wood piles if you need to. You just know, I want tons of wood. And in games like that, Stone Axe truly excels because it gives you wood like no other card can.
Right. And as Riley said, it's not for every game that it's completely busto, but when, the crazy upside of this is why we have it so high. Is there anything to say about like the awkwardness of playing it, or do you think it's easy enough to play?
I mean, we've seen cards before that have 1 clay cost, and it definitely is not nothing to play those cards, right? 1 clay is a very awkward cost, especially with cards you want to play early, something like Scullery. It's less of a problem for Stone Axe because it's more of a mid-game card, but you definitely have to be cognizant of that 1 clay. It's not super free, so you want to plan ahead how you plan to get that 1 clay, especially since it's very likely you're going to want to play this on family growth because it's a common play pattern that, I family grow, I have more family members, I want to be able to take wood with those family members. So planning on how you're getting the Stone Axe out is super important. And then I think there are some games where you do want to do a very early Stone Axe. Obviously, a card like Collector is going to be an easy way to get that clay, and cards like Collector, where you know you want to fence early, Stone Axe ends up being very powerful because you can take Reedstone food, and then in addition to building your first room, you now have a way to get 6 wood very quickly, which really accelerates that fence action. So there's some games where you're going to want to use Stone Axe like 5 times to get an insane amount of wood, but be on the lookout for those games where you just want to get that wood quickly. You want to get, maybe you only use it twice and you get 6 wood with it, but the tempo on Stone Axe can be very important. So that's something to keep in mind with Stone Axe.
Yeah, and I also want to give a special shout out to you because you've been championing this card as something that's going to be really, really strong and revised, and I probably would have had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, I think you might be saying it late, but even if not, it's a card you want to prioritize in the draft, as long as you know that it's something you want, and that's something that's going to take a little bit of play, figuring out what games want Stone Axe and what games don't. But the main thing is, hey, do I want a lot of wood? And that's something I think most people can figure out.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to our number 2 minor improvement is Seed Almanac. Play Agricola players know this one as the treasure map. This is a special way to get plows in that you're not taking actions at all that look like plows. You're just playing your minor improvements and you're getting plows. The play pattern I typically see with this, I don't know about you, is one room with a bunch of occupations. You grow with this, and then I don't know, you kind of do some start player spam in the mid game.
Yeah, you'll definitely see some interesting games, or if you're sitting behind them, some annoying games where somebody just starts spamming out their miners to plow. And while that's still solid, you're still getting a lot of plows for a low cost. That is something you want to be avoiding a lot of the time with treasure maps. So planning out when you're going to be able to take those minor actions is definitely something to keep in mind with this card. But the raw efficiency of this card is hard to overstate. It's just very powerful to be able to, on top of just having unblockable plows, as Lumen said, you don't need to take that plow space. You get those plows for the relatively low cost of just playing miners. Even if you start playing, you're still getting the benefit of having those miners in play. And so it's a very powerful card.
I guess similarly, you don't need to stretch it too much. Like, even if the plows are still worth 2 points, you know, you don't have to tunnel vision on trading your miner, like playing miners and getting a food to plow a field. Know your limits, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one thing that you will definitely see occasionally is people that are like, oh, I'm going to get a miner every time, or a field every time I play a miner. So I'm going to save all of my miners until I have a treasure map in play. Often at the cost of growing, they're like, oh, I don't want to play a miner. So I'm just going to make sure I can get my ox out before I start player for growth.
Right.
And I'm sure most people are going to realize that growing is very important. But you can take that further, and you really don't even need to get 4 or 5 fields from treasure map. Even if you're just getting 2 or 3 fields for a reed and 2 or 3 food, that's a very efficient plow. That's more efficient than a lot of the plows we've seen.
Pretty much all of them.
Yeah. So you don't have to push this card to its limit. Sometimes you will be able to if you have something like Furniture Maker or you Beneficiary, as we talked about in the Ox video, makes this extremely powerful. You can get it out very early.
Yep.
And so you will see some absurd games where this is 5 plows, 6 plows. But even in games where that's not the case, this is very powerful. It's something that we've seen from most of these miners, not all of them, but most of them, is that they have pretty high floors. And they're a solid card in most strategies, even if you're not pushing them to the limit.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of pushing cards to the limit, I think there is a pretty wide gap between all the miners we've talked about and this next one. I think in chess notation, we would call this Guest Room Double X Clam. The number 1 card in the E-deck is Guest Room, which in Play Agricola was a premier miner, one of the best, probably not the best, but definitely a card that you could build a strategy around and was always going to be very solid. And there's 2 reasons why this card is going to be even better, I think really absurd in Revised, and those are that obviously food, if you've played Old Agricola, food is more plentiful in Revised, or even if you've just played Revised and seen 6 food bottom feeding in round 6, food is very plentiful in a lot of games. And then if you're familiar with Old Guest Room you could not use for an action in the round you played it, and it was still a very solid card. So the fact that you can play Guest Room and then immediately take a food off of it to place another person in that round is really, really incredible. I think we're going to see some completely ludicrous games from Guest Room. There's a lot of cards that can allow you to play this card in round 4, and essentially you're growing in round 4. Those dream lover games or in that ilk games are very possible with this card. And unlike something like Lover, you can play this card and then build a room and grow into it afterwards. So Guest Room, I think we're going to see really be the premier card in a lot of games that kind of takes over. And it might not be the most fun to play against sometimes, but when you're the person playing guest room, you're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thanks for bringing up that extra benefit compared to the original guest room also, because, yeah, the tempo of having that action immediately is, like, really nasty. A trap that you might fall into once or twice while thinking about playing guest room is trying to make sure you have food equal to the number of future rounds plus the current one. And that, I would say, would be a mistake. If you are a round or two off on food, or even sometimes 3 or 4 rounds on food, depending on the game situation, you can play guest room and select a round late in the game where you probably don't need an extra action, and you'll be fine. I think it's important to remember that the number of future food is optional, and effectively having an extra action for like 7 rounds is still awesome. Even if it's not rounds 8 through 14, it's better than that. It's rounds, 5 through 12.
Yeah,
or 5 through 11. So definitely be aware that you can use guest room in that way as well.
For sure. And then something to be on the lookout for, I think the premier way to play guest room is going to be to use it as essentially your first growth, to kind of rush it, get as much food as you can by either playing something like Whiskey Distiller, prioritizing the fireplace, and then playing it and growing in round 4 or 5 or 6, depending on the game. But there are definitely some games where you'll be able to notice your opponents maybe not doing what they should, not prioritizing room parts, and you'll be able to build and grow first or second, and then play guest room for maybe 6 actions afterwards, and then you still can kind of take over the game. And so guest room essentially costs you a room. It's pretty close to a room in terms of resources. So be cognizant of those resources, and if you could be doing something better, even though guest room is so powerful. Most of the time, the most powerful thing to be doing is going to be prioritizing it. Be aware that it's a flexible card. You, in addition to maybe playing it earlier, but only getting, say, 7 actions from it, you can play it later, get a few less actions, but you get tempo from doing something else. So it is a very flexible card, so be aware of all the different things you can do with it, and don't necessarily go every game, I have to rush this, I have to take food and then play it as soon as possible. Agricola is a game where there's the entire board of actions available, so just be aware.
Yep, absolutely. So I guess it shouldn't be too surprising that a minor improvement that in a lot of ways emulates Lover, one of the top occupations in the game, is our number 1 minor improvement in the E-deck.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a card that I think you're going to be seeing a lot of, seeing it take over some games. Family Grow Flip 7.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely some games where guest room strategies are going to feel unbeatable, so I think it's very deserving of the number 1 slot.
Yeah, maybe ban-worthy in the future, but we'll probably let the stats talk.
Yeah, I think it's not one of those cards where it's like completely absurd on the face that we have to immediately ban. I think we can take some time and see it.
Because the cost is real. All that food, the 4 wood and a reed, it's a real cost.
Yeah, like I said, there's some games where it's going to feel unbeatable, but I've definitely seen plenty of games where people devote their game to this card, and it ends up not working out super well. So we'll wait and see, but for now, just enjoy playing it, because it is a very fun card to play. You get to play the game kind of differently than you would normally in a lot of Agricola games, which is something I always enjoy.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us through this journey. Hope you watched all 4 videos in this series of our favorite E-deck cards. Leave a comment on your thoughts about these cards that we're talking about, or any you think we might have missed in our top 10 lists. Thanks for watching. Thanks, Riley, for doing this video series with me. It's been very fun to do this.
And go out and play these cards. I am really excited about these cards. I think we obviously only mentioned 22 of them, but all of the other cards in this deck are really exciting too. And so the only way to truly experience that is to go in and get your hands on them and play some games. I think you're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, and not that you probably need to hear this again, but these cards have been so extensively play-tested. It's by far the most play-tested set before getting published, because it was available for like 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
So Yeah, definitely echo what Riley's saying about go out and play these and enjoy them.
Yeah, have fun.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.